many different types of adjuncts, temporary, part-time faculty are there in higher education today? Temporary, part-time, seasonal, visiting, non-traditional, contingent, contractual, and even celebrity instruction serve as adjuncts in higher ed today. Some of them do it for a living. Some of them do it for fun. Some of them just do it for the money. But if you're an adjunct, or you want to be, figuring out what kind of adjuncts opportunities are available in today's world is important. It's critical. So let's take a look at what is an adjunct. What are our options? What are your options? So tap the like button and let's get started. Hi, I'm James Callahan, and this is The Do-Over Show, and I have about 20 years plus of adjuncting experience. Some of it I did for fun, some of it I did for the money. I always did it because I enjoyed being in the classroom. Sometimes, I did it because I just wanted to be around a college campus because and if you may feel this too, there's a romantic attraction just being around academia, especially in the fall or the spring when things are changing on campus and people are nervous and you're just gliding from the library to the classroom and back to the library again. And you go into those old buildings, the ones with the books in them, libraries, not coffee shops like they are today, but actual libraries where you are told to work quietly. And maybe even in the good old days, you would get shushed. Have you ever shushed somebody? Have you ever been shushed? I think I've shushed people in my day. That's the kind of romantic attraction that higher education holds for some of us. So if you want to teach, or if you have the opportunity to teach in a non-traditional role as an adjunct today, what does that mean for you? Well, it means you will not be tenure track. And that's the basic difference between full-time permanent faculty, aka tenure track, and those who are considered part-time of all varieties. That's the big divider. The difference is the promise of or the opportunity of future employment. Now, after the tenure process, after onboarding, interview, the tenure process of promotion, and you're granted tenure as an associate professor, the next step will be each year you'll get a contract. Not because your future employment is in doubt, but because that's just the contractual arrangement you make from year to year, and it will reflect any cost of living increase or any meritorious raises you receive. And unless you do something really wrong, really stupid to yourself, or something politically inappropriate, you will get re-upped every year, and that makes you a full-time permanent employee of a college or university. And as an adjunct, you'll never have that. A friend of mine just notified me that just 3 weeks prior to the start of the semester, after she had already worked through class prep and her syllabus, that the department chair called her and told her, unfortunately, the section that she was planned on teaching has to be given to a tenured faculty member because their class was under-enrolled, below the threshold to offer the class. And because of a contractual arrangement with tenured faculty have to teach a certain number of courses. And that meant that the adjunct, my friend, that her course was going to be taken away, even though her course was enrolled well beyond the minimum threshold. But in order to fulfill that requirement at the college where she teaches, she lost the course. Now, she didn't get fired. In fact, the department chair told her that she's scheduled for 2 courses next semester if those courses meet the minimum enrollment requirements and if the tenure track faculty or the tenured faculty, if their courses meet the minimum requirement, then she'll have 2 courses next semester. So you better get preparing for those. That is what happens in higher education today. So let's find out what kind of adjunct you can be according to the practices of the college or university that you might have an opportunity to teach at. And yes, it really does depend because there is no universal standard for what it means to be an adjunct or how colleges or universities treat adjuncts or what they offer adjuncts or how they regard adjuncts or how they respect adjuncts. But one thing is clear. The greatest change in higher education over the last 25 years, with a 50% increase in the number of people filling this role, have been adjuncts. Yes, the 50% increase means that today, about 70% plus of all college courses taught, universities, Ivy League, community college, tech colleges, and even some for-profit schools, you roll those in and it really increases the number. Over 70% of the courses taught today are taught by somebody who is not a permanent member of a faculty. That is, they're not tenure track. They are year to year, course by course. You see, those numbers are surprising for most of us because we have this old school vision of what higher education was with some badly bearded professor with tweed jackets with the leather elbow patches, maybe a pipe, a stuffy old office filled to the roof with books and things laid about everywhere. You know, the messy office thing when you go to visit for office hours, if you ever go to the old professor's office for office hours. Yeah, we have that old romantic vision of this must be what higher education is. When for the most part, adjuncts, if they do get an office, it's in the basement of the science building and it smells like formaldehyde, and you end up sharing it with 6 other people. So with more than 60% of people who are called faculty in higher education today being non-traditional or non-permanent faculty, we have to ask ourselves the question, where do we fit in this and what are the options? Now, if you're wondering why this seismic shift has been complicated, it's because most of us pursued a graduate education even if we had to pay for it out of our own pocket. Yeah, you see, the old days of getting a fully supported stipend from a school for the rarity of a small cohort to be granted a Ph.D. or a master's degree in that area, those have shifted to graduate schools becoming a cash source for colleges and universities. And they offer as many degree opportunities as we're willing to pay for. That leads to a glut, a surplus of people with terminal degrees, masters and PhDs, depending on the field, who are looking for full-time jobs. Now, that means that today there are about 10 PhDs graduated each and every year for every one opening, full-time opening in higher education. So it's obviously their market. It's not the market of those who are pursuing higher education or cash for a diploma. Now, what happens? That means that a lot of us have to find something else to do or fit in where we can, or that is, become an adjunct. In a recent regional higher education publication, there were more adjunct jobs being advertised than tenure track opportunities. And if there were real transparency in the way hiring took place at colleges and universities today, you'd get to see how that ratio actually plays out, how many more temporary, contingent, one-course options there are for adjunct faculty compared with the full-time offerings. So back to the types of adjuncts. How many are there? Well, quite a few, it turns out. In larger public university systems, in the bigger cities in the United States, for example, there are often unions which represent contingent or part-time faculty. Now, what they do usually is very different than the average experience of a private college or university anywhere else. But a union will actually guarantee you some year-to-year benefits. They will protect you from dismissal without cause, think a binding arbitration. And you will actually get a multi-year contract in most of those settings, but you won't be tenure track. That is, there'll be a 2 or 3 year commitment at most, and you'll fill in that role, and you will be protected by the union, and your wage will be controlled by the union, and maybe even offer benefits within that setting. And congratulations, you're in the minority of those who teach as non-traditional faculty in higher education. Now, these full-time non-traditional faculty, or these adjuncts at public universities with unions, they have one little exception. That is, there are people who come in and teach just one course, and it's a category I like to call celebrity adjuncts. Celebrity adjuncts are famous, influential political figures, social figures, business leaders who are brought to a university because of the public value they add. They get to advertise, look who's come to teach at our university. And it draws attention. It gets them in the paper. It helps them with PR. And these celebrity adjuncts can make $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 for teaching a course at the college or university. Now, the other kind of exception to this in the larger university is that they bring in a sort of a lower powered celebrity adjunct or a temporary person, and that is somebody who's in a professional track, on a partner track at a local business firm, law firm, accounting firm, and they're usually required to teach as an adjunct in local colleges and universities, more prominent ones, so that they can recruit from the pool of soon to be graduating majors within that field. Yes, those are the celebrity adjuncts, or the exception in the larger metropolitan areas. So if you're not a celebrity, you're not famous, or you're not in that recruiting track in a major metropolitan area, what's the next option? The next option is that you're in a second career opportunity as an adjunct. That is, you have a full-time job, especially if you're in a non-STEM field, if you're in the humanities. You usually have a job often unrelated to your graduate degree or your major focus, and you also want to continue teaching or use your graduate degree to your advantage. Maybe to make a little money, to stay current in the field, to maybe get yourself ready for an adjunct or a full-time opportunity, to move from an adjunct to a full-time role. I did that once. It rarely happens. I would tell you not to count on it unless you are something really special. When it happened to me, I was not special. It was just the right place, right time kind of thing. But for those who are second career adjuncts, they usually rely on a primary income. And when they do so, they take advantage of their graduate degree and they make a little money on the side. Now, one of the earliest forms of adjuncting, when things started to change 25, 30 years ago, was retiring faculty or aging faculty or emeriti faculty who wanted to keep teaching in the school, the college or university, wanted to keep them around because they had experience, because they were the grandfather figure or grandmother figure, and because they just wanted to have some ongoing status at the university, or often in exchange for, aren't you ready to retire yet? Tell you what, if you retire, we'll give you a course that you can stay teaching. You can keep your office even. Yes, you get to live around the school, but only teach one course. Yes, you can do that. That was the first wave of adjuncting that took place about 25 or 30 years ago. But it stopped. It stopped because these are people who didn't have post-tenure review, who were about to age out of their teaching and were given an opportunity of making a graceful exit. When I was a grad student, considering my Ph.D., I was told over and over by people who knew the field and knew the age and the likely retirement that there was going to be this huge vacuum created by an entire generation of tenure track professors who were about to retire. But they never did. They just kept on teaching. 60, 65, 70, 75. The oldest professor that I'm aware of today at one of the schools where I've been adjuncting is 83 years old. They teach a full load. They are in committee work. They do everything that everybody else in the university does. And with the elimination of forced retirements and with the slow creep of post-tenure review, as long as this person keeps producing, they're going to keep making the most money of any professor at that school just because of their years of tenure. So in the new reality of adjuncting, most of those who teach as an adjunct or are pursuing the idea of teaching as an adjunct hold a terminal degree in their field. They have some real world experience and they want to try their hand at teaching or find their way into higher education or maintain their place within higher education, even on the margins. Now, most of these would love to teach full time, especially in the non-STEM fields. Most of those would love to teach full-time, but there aren't any openings. So from the category of frustrated adjuncts, we come to another category, and that is a group I call professional adjuncts. Now, these are people who pursue teaching as an adjunct as their primary occupation. Now, they do so by putting together 2, 3, or 4 different colleges or universities and multiple courses at these colleges or universities. So they end up teaching more than the average tenure track professor does. But they do this as their primary source of income, and they stay in this role as a professional adjunct. They usually rely on a spouse or a partner for things like making a living and benefits like healthcare. But most of them work within that small geographic area in a major metropolitan area where they can actually function by driving from college to college or university to university and keeping the library in the trunk and grading papers while they sip on a cup of cold coffee on their way to their next teaching job. And this group is the loudest, harshest group of adjuncts in higher education today. They make a lot of noise. They're very frustrated. Their primary mode of communication is complaint, and they cry out that this should not be the case. It's not fair. I've done video after video on this group of people, and I've been in this category myself, so I confess I've been a professional adjunct, and I have been frustrated, self-righteous, martyrdom, thinking that I deserved more. And I may have deserved more. You may deserve more. But no one ever gave me an opportunity because I complained. So unless you have the support of a partner or you're a trust fund baby, the professional adjunct life is not a life that people would say, yes, you should sign up for that. There are very few people who move from the professional adjunct life to the tenure track life today. It just doesn't happen. And to hope that it would happen, to hope that you'll be the unicorn out of this group of people that will somehow get the job, is just not going to happen. Most people say you should set a time limit and say, I'm going to adjunct to try to get into it, to get any teaching experience I can, but I'm going to set a time limit of 3, 4, 5 years. And after that, I'm just going to give up. I'll teach my one course, but I need a regular full-time job. And that's where it takes you to the area. This is a highly valued area in today's world and workforce, and that is you need transferable skills. So the communication skills, the writing skills, the mentoring, coaching skills that you may acquire as an adjunct or through your role in higher education, as a grad student helping out TA and RAing, those are things that you can take to your advantage, even though you're not going to be using them. In a classroom, these are things that are highly desirable in today's workforce. And when you bring those real world skills, transferable skills, and learn how to talk about them that way, then you can leverage your higher education experience. Even if it's not helping you in higher education, it can help you in the private sector. Now, for those of you with a STEM background, obviously your circumstance is different because the private sector is the primary means of employment for you. And unless you dream of being a chemist within higher education, you can be a chemist outside of higher education. But if you're a philosopher or a historian, they're not hiring for philosophers or historians at today's major corporations. It's just not a role. So if you're a Jane Austen expert and you can show her reliance on Fanny Burney, congratulations. Outside of higher education and outside of an English lit setting, you need to find transferable skills. So did I miss any types of adjuncts in higher education today? Probably. You can probably fill in a couple categories or maybe mix a couple and come up with a hybrid. And the institutional titles are meaningless. They don't mean anything outside of the orbit of that college or university. Whether you're called a professor, an instructor, faculty, hey you, it doesn't matter. Those are titles that only mean something within the school, and they're made up and they're contrived and they're not transferable to another college or university. I was a visiting professor at one school, and I met another visiting professor because I had that on my CV, and they described their role as a visiting professor. They were an adjunct. They taught 2 courses a semester, and they had another job. They looked at me and said, what do you actually do for a living? And I said, I teach full-time. I'm on committees. I'm actually a full-time faculty member, but I'm considered visiting because I'm not tenure track at that school. Apples and oranges, same title. So don't get enamored with a title that a college or university is willing to give you in exchange for not giving you things like job security or the promise of what you're going to be doing next semester. Nope. When I go into a class now with students and they look at me and they say, hey, what do I call you? I said, you can call me anything you want as long as it's Dr. Callahan. Oh, and if you want to figure out how much money you can make as an adjunct, that's an important question. I've done a video on it and I'll tag it at the end of this. So be sure to follow along and get started figuring out how much does this actually pay. And thanks for being part of the Do-Over Show. Please, could you tap the like button? Because it really helps a lowly adjunct like me. And while you're down there, how about you subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. I'm so glad you found me and I found you. Thanks.